when we speaking about Rosatom, it's important to realize that it's not kind of a company. I mean, it might look to you like it's just a company like, I don't know, Electricité de France or some similar one, but it's not. It's part of a Russian state. It until 2005, it actually had the name of a Ministry of Atomic Power of Russian Federation, and then everything that was a ministry just changed the name, but inside it's still the same. It's part of Russian state. Rosatom includes about 350 different companies, and it's nuclear fuel cycle related and not related, some service companies, lots of different companies. When it comes to new nuclear reactor or nuclear reactors, there is 37 nuclear reactors in operation in Russia today, including 2 small reactors, or alternatively, it's called floating reactors. It's in Chukotka and it's already in operation. It's 2 small reactors on the barge on the coast of Chukotka. I mean, altogether, these 37 nuclear reactors produce about 20% of electricity in Russia. And Rosatom also deal with the stuff like nuclear weapon. They're doing maintenance of nuclear weapon in Russia and development of nuclear weapon. They have 4 icebreakers and they want to build more of them. They are very active in developing small modular reactors now, but all those small reactors is basically, there is nothing new about it. It's way old projects that were developed usually back in the Soviet Union, but for some reason didn't get governmental funding and were not implemented. So today, when different companies across the world trying to create a new fashion for small reactors, Rosatom is just taking their old project and proposing that it's something new and fashionable, which is not true. Another thing that we just got to know recently about Rosatom is that it also cooperates very much with weapon companies in Russia, which are all governmental, of course, in Russia, but in the field of non-nuclear weapon, like they could supply something to produce rocket fuel or different components or technologies for different weapons company, but not nuclear weapon company in Russia. When it comes to foreign activities, Rosatom is building a lot of new nuclear reactors. Well, in fact, it's a company that at this moment having the biggest number of reactors around the world under construction. It also controls about 16% of global nuclear fuel market, and it's not only supply of enriched uranium or ready-to-use fuel or Brennan elementon in Europe, in European Union. They also supply a lot of uranium to United States and to many countries around the world. And they also built in the past or helped to build over 20 research reactors in different countries. We pay special attention to research reactors because the fuel used for research reactors is usually a very highly enriched uranium fuel, which creates, of course, the risk of nuclear proliferation. One more thing about Europe and its dependence on Russia and Rosatom, it's important to understand that about 20% of uranium needs of European Union covered by Rosatom directly, but there is another almost 19% of uranium that's coming from Kazakhstan, and the production of uranium in Kazakhstan is also dependent on Rosatom, and Rosatom actually control at least part of the uranium production in Kazakhstan. Just more about new nuclear reactors, which from my point of view and many other experts that working on Russia, we think that the scheme of constructing new nuclear reactors in different countries is more of it's more about geopolitical games and efforts of Vladimir Putin and putting other countries in deep dependence on Russian nuclear supply than about business. Today, Rosatom claims they are building, well, from 34 to 36 new nuclear reactors around the world. And I will tell you later which countries they are building reactors in. My organization, Ecodefense, we've been, before war in Ukraine started, we've been for a few years in a row preparing research and reports where we would verify exactly what's happening with construction of reactors in different countries. Is it happening or not? And Rosatom just pretend it's happening, or is there contract signed, or it's just some kind of negotiations going on and the contract is not there yet. So stuff like that. We just wanted to check out how, I mean, if Rosatom is actually telling truth or not. And I mean, at our latest research that we published in 2020, we found out that in reality, Rosatom is having contracts for a maximum of 25 new nuclear reactors in different countries, and not 34 or 35 or 36, as they say. And it's also interesting that Rosatom officially claims that it's foreign projects altogether costs about 130 billion of American dollars. And our research and investigation shows that all Rosatom projects are actually about 30% lower than this. We also calculated in different countries how many reactors actually under active construction. And it's important to understand that, I mean, sometimes companies even signing a contract, but then something could happen and a nuclear power plant would never be built, like, for example, like happened in Russia back in 2013 with Kaliningrad nuclear power plant. It was already under construction, but then it was stopped completely. So we are also measuring not only number of reactors that contracted, we're also measuring like the active construction process. And back in the spring of 2020, we counted only 8 new nuclear reactors under active construction that Rosatom was doing, and that was in Belarus, Iran, Turkey, India, and Bangladesh. I've seen other independent estimations, for example, from last year, that were claiming that it's not 8 new nuclear reactors under active construction anymore. It's now more like 13, but still, it's far from the number that is in contracts, which is showing us that Rosatom is not capable of building all those reactors it signed the contracts for at the same time. And it means that, dealing with Rosatom means that they like to sign contracts, but because they cannot build all of those reactors they signed for at the same time, well, it's likely that if someone today sign a contract with Rosatom. Their reactors, if they are built, it will come online in 10 to 15 years or even 20 years, just because you would have to wait until other reactors will be completed and the Rosatom will be capable technically to start a new reactors. But well, they still signing new contracts. They don't care about this. Additionally, Rosatom is having contracts and they intend to build their new reactors. It's Hungary in the European Union, it's Egypt, Eldaba, and in China. Before war in Ukraine started, there was also a new project in Finland, but that was canceled in May 2022. And now Rosatom is trying to take Finnish government to court, or Finnish company Fenavoima to court, and asking for compensation of funds they already spent, they say, on this project, to develop the documentation for this project, because there was never any active construction of reactor by Rosatom in Finland. According to our estimation, there are about $90 billion allocated in Russian state budget for those new reactors project in different countries for Rosatom. And that's very interesting thing, because I mean, usually when we talk about Western companies, if they are, or it was the experience from the past at least, if they are building reactors, they have to attract some kind of a private investment, also governmental investment. They have to attract investment. No one is actually giving them the whole money just to build reactors in different countries. The situation with Rosatom is very different. All the money which goes to Rosatom projects in the different countries, it's all money either from Russian state budget, means money from Russian taxpayers, or from some banks linked to Russian government, which means basically effectively money given by Russian government. So when we speak about new projects that are under construction by Rosatom, it's always done with governmental money from Russia. Rosatom has never been able to attract any significant private funding or any kind of funding except from a Russian government. And that's another reason why we're saying that it's not so much about business, it's more about creating dependence on Russian nuclear supply around the world and using it as then a tool for political influence. And that's why, I mean, in this case, it's quite logical that Russian government actually give money to Rosatom to build reactors in the different countries, just to get more influence in those countries. It's pretty clear when you look at Hungary and how Hungary inside the European Union is basically the only country that is all the time trying to block as many sanctions against Russia as possible. You can get an idea how this political influence works. And in Hungary, it's clearly, I mean, it's also about oil and gas that Hungary gets from Russia. But first of all, for Hungary, it's nuclear matter, because they already got 4 old Russian reactors that are in operation today. They get nuclear fuel for those reactors, and then they now got a loan from Putin estimated at 10 billion of euro to build a new nuclear power plant with 2 reactors. So, I mean, that's, I believe, the kind of a model that Putin was thinking about when he created state corporation Rosatom, and when the whole idea came up to create this state corporation instead of the ministry. So a little bit about nuclear fuel or spent nuclear fuel, because I mean we probably we all know that when we're speaking about nuclear fuel, there is it's not only about the radioactive danger that will exist for thousands of years. It's also concern over nuclear proliferation, because in the spent fuel, we know that there is plutonium in the spent nuclear fuel coming out of reactors. So in our latest research, we calculated how much nuclear waste will come to Russia from all those foreign projects, because the usual scheme that Rosatom proposes in different countries is not only building reactors and supplying nuclear fuel, it's also about they also propose for some money, although not very big money, but still for some money, to take out spent nuclear fuel from the countries they supply fuel to. And we calculated from all this nuclear expansion, in case the reactors that are under construction by Rosatom today, and also reactors that included in the contracts that exist today, if all these reactors will come to operation and will be in operation for the designed period of time, there will be almost 25,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel will come to Russia then. Well, to just give you an idea what is 25,000 of tons of spent nuclear fuel, that is approximately amount of spent nuclear fuel that was accumulated through the whole Soviet nuclear program, since it started after Second World War and until Soviet Union collapsed, or even a little bit after this, there was approximately 25,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel accumulated. But well, it could be even more than 25,000 of tons of spent nuclear fuel. It could be if all those reactors built by Rosatom will come online and connected to grid and will work longer. There will be, their operation license will be extended, and usually it goes like at least 50% of the time. Like, for example, if the, well, VVER 1000 reactor is designed for 30 years operation, in Russia, Rosatom would usually extend their operation period from 30 to 45 years, or even longer sometimes. Well, in case of extension like this, there will be almost 40,000 of tons of spent nuclear fuel that will come back to Russia. And of course, it will go to some place in Russia, in Siberia, likely to Krasnoyarsk, where today Rosatom is already built underground research laboratory to do the research for geologic disposal of spent nuclear fuel and other types of nuclear waste as well. And there is quite a long time movement, public movement exists in Krasnoyarsk, which is protesting the geologic repository work. But, well, unfortunately, since Rosatom is so important for Vladimir Putin, well, it's very hard to protest against them, and it's very hard to get to make your protest successful. What I wanted also to stress today is that Rosatom is actively taking part in the war in Ukraine. Well, first of all, people from Rosatom are present at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant from beginning of the war, when the nuclear plant got occupied by Russian army. So when Russian army came there, people from Rosatom also came there. And today, Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, at least in the eyes of Russian government, it's officially now Russian nuclear power plant operated by Rosatom. And we've heard reports from different media suggesting that personnel, people who worked at Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Ukrainian people, been tortured and been forced to sign the new contracts with Rosatom. Another example is that when 1 year ago, Russian army occupied for some time the Chernobyl exclusion zone. People from Rosatom also were present there and were advising Russian army there. As I mentioned earlier, Rosatom is in charge of maintenance and development of nuclear fuel in Russia. And when Vladimir Putin, Russian president, threatening world again and again with using nuclear fuel, you should understand that he is referring to Rosatom, basically. It will be people from Rosatom who will be in charge of using nuclear weapon, which I hope, well, of course, never happens, but still. Another example that we learned from the Washington Post newspaper, which referred to some kind of intelligence documents they obtained, that Rosatom was heavily involved in the supply of Russian weapons companies working with missiles, producing missiles. And Rosatom helps them to produce missiles that then fired into Ukraine. So the Rosatom is not just the civil company. It takes active part in the war, and that's why me and a lot of my colleagues, also our colleagues in Germany that we work together with, we're all calling on politicians in Europe to introduce sanctions against Rosatom for one very simple reason. Rosatom is actually a military company, and it takes part in this conflict, in this war. And there must be sanctions, and I deeply believe in the necessity of sanctions against Rosatom. One more thing that I wanted to talk about today is how much is basically why there are no sanctions against Rosatom so far. Because I mean, if you trying to watch what's happening in the field of sanctions against Russia for the war in Ukraine, you might actually wonder why is it like all kinds of energy companies are sanctioned, coal companies, oil companies. Well, I mean, formally, there are no sanctions against gas company, the main one, Gazprom, but there is a price cap on gas, and well, still something is done. But when it comes to nuclear power, nothing is done. There is not a single sanction on the EU level against Rosatom. And one of the reasons is quite a big dependence on Russian nuclear supply in the European Union. Well, first of all, now there are almost 20, a little bit less than 20 nuclear reactors, very old nuclear reactors that built at the time of the Soviet Union by Soviet engineers in 5 countries in European Union, which is Hungary, Bulgaria, Finland, Czech Republic, and Slovak Republic. And they get, until today, they were getting nuclear fuel only from Russia. And there is 2 types of nuclear reactors in those countries established: the older type, VVR-440, and not so old type, VVR-1000. And in case of VVR-1000, it's relatively easy to switch on a different supplier of nuclear fuel. for VVR-1000 reactors, because American company Westinghouse was actually already producing fuel for VVR-1000s in Ukraine before war, on the request of Ukraine, who wanted to break dependence on Russian nuclear supply. But when it comes to reactors called VVR-440, right now, Rosatom is the only source of nuclear fuel for those reactors. And it's not clear how and when this fuel could be replaced. Theoretically, it can be replaced by other companies, but right now, there is no alternative supplier today for those reactors with a nuclear fuel. There are reports suggesting that maybe even from the next year, the American company Westinghouse, along with European partners, might be able to start producing this nuclear fuel for VVR-440. But myself and actually a lot of people I've met, a lot of experts I've met in the past, talking on this, I've heard from many experts from the West that it's unlikely that this type of fuel can be produced that fast by Western companies. I mean, theoretically, it's possible, but unlikely will be next year, as Western nuclear companies suggesting. One reason is that, I mean, there is very strong dependence on nuclear fuel from Russia that cannot be stopped right now. Well, I mean, it can be stopped if you stop those nuclear reactors, of course. I mean, another thing is that it's not just nuclear fuel, it's also maintenance and repairs in different parts that needed for old reactors. It's also coming from Russia. Another thing is that the supply of enriched uranium for the fuel production never stopped since the beginning of war. We registered at least 5 transportations of enriched uranium from Russia to a German nuclear fuel producing plant in Lingen since the war started. So there was at least 5 transportations that we've been protesting quite a lot against. Responding to a question about possibility to break cooperation with Russia, the management of a plant in Lingen said they are not going to stop any cooperation with Russia for a very simple reason, that there are no sanctions on the European side about it. And they said, like, well, if there would be sanctions, then they will stop. It's interesting that not all European nuclear companies behave this way. When we speak about Rosatom, which is not German company, it's French company, but it owns the plant in Lingen in Germany. They are saying they don't care. They're saying as long as it's permitted, they will continue cooperation with Rosatom. And it doesn't look like they care how much or how many of war crimes there were done by Rosatom people in the Ukraine. The same also goes for a German company called Siemens Energy. And that's another example. There is a new nuclear reactor project in the EU, in Hungary, by Rosatom. It exists today. Last September, Hungary issued construction license for Rosatom to build 2 new nuclear reactors in Hungary. Active construction didn't start yet, but Rosatom a few years ago already signed a contract with Siemens Energy for the supply of so-called instrumentation and control systems for those new reactors. What is instrumentation and control systems? Shortly, it's computer systems that controlling reactors. different processes. And this high-tech equipment is produced by both Siemens Energy and Framatome that would usually participate together in a project with Rosatom. So we went to Siemens Energy annual shareholders meeting that was just happening not long ago, last month. And we've been speaking there, and other shareholders been speaking on this one as well. And we were saying, and we were asking why Siemens Energy is not stopping cooperation with Rosatom, with Russian, basically part of a Russian government. And what we heard back was the same thing that Framatome people were saying, is that as long as it's allowed by politicians, as long as there are no sanctions, they will respect signed contracts with Russians. And they don't care about whether Rosatom are a war criminal or not. I mean, but it's interesting that not all companies involved in nuclear behave like this. For example, Urienko, the company that we protested over decades because it was sending radioactive waste from its uranium enrichment plant in Gronau to Russia. I have to mention that Urienko, in the beginning of war, said that they are suspending all kinds of cooperation with Russia. Well, I mean, they didn't say for how long, but they said they suspend everything. So there are companies with different attitude, but the most of the nuclear companies, they want to keep cooperation with Rosatom, and they don't care about war or bad things that Rosatom is doing. So as you can see here, the dependence of European Union and its nuclear industry on Russia, it's quite sensible. Well, it's sensitive, it's quite big. I don't think it's impossible to break this dependence because, well, I mean, just remember what happened with gas supply for Germany. A year ago, you wouldn't find a single expert that would tell you it's possible to break dependence on a Russian gas in Germany in 1 year. And look what's happening now. I mean, I'm not trying to say that gas is good or something like that. No, I'm specifically saying about that 1 year ago, no one would believe it's possible to replace Russian gas, and today it's replaced. Germany doesn't need Russian gas anymore. I think dependence on nuclear in Europe is high, but it's lower than gas dependence of Germany on Russia 1 year ago. And that makes me thinking that it's possible to break this dependence and stop paying money to Vladimir Putin regime in Moscow. But there must be a very strong political will to do this. And we can see that nuclear industry will not do this itself. Not in Germany, not in France, not anywhere else. Nuclear industry wants to keep Rosatom as a good partner and wants to enjoy new resources coming from Rosatom. That was pretty much more or less all. I think it was more or less like, 30, 40 minutes that I promised for the presentation. And now I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much for attention.